Hi, in this video we're going to be discussing what are research-based assessments, or RBAs, and how to use them. And I'm Ben Van Dusen from Iowa State University. So research-based assessments, these are typically given during the very first and last week of a class. So you get an idea of where students are starting at and where they're ending the semester. So you can see what change has occurred through instruction. And these are designed to assess shifts in student learning, attitudes, or identities. And some of these are referred to as million-dollar assessments. And that's because oftentimes to develop them, it requires an NSF grant. There's a lot of work that goes into it. So these are different than your typical end of semester test. So some of the things that are typically done is they begin with qualitative analyses where they'll interview both students and instructors. Then they'll create a set of open-ended responses for students to take. And they'll perform think-alouds while students take these assessments to see kind of what ideas are going through their heads. Then comes the quantitative analyses where they've created a multiple choice test from all this. They'll usually analyze that using classical test theory and or item response theory. And all of this is designed to have one final multiple choice test that once students take, you can have a reasonably good idea of what's going on in their mind. And not just for one student, but for a whole wide range of students. And you can reliably have an idea of what's happening in their brains or what they're thinking. So this is RBAs. Why should you care about them? Well, let's say your administrators want to develop this new classroom and put all their money into it. And you say, wait a minute, that's not what I want. I want a classroom that looks like this, where I can do small group learning activities. Might not look as fancy, but now I'm going to need to provide evidence that this classroom on the right is in fact superior to this classroom on the left for your purposes. So this is where RBAs can come in and provide at least a semi-objective measure of student learning. And there's lots of normative data too, and this is data from other studies you can draw on as comparative data. And historically, this has been a major driver of change within the discipline-based education research community. So in STEM education, this has been a major way to test curriculum, refine classroom spaces, and identify effective learning activities. So how do you administer RBAs? So first the when. As I said, the pre-test you should give during the first week of class, or even before the first week if you can. This tells you kind of where your students are starting at. And then you give the post-test during the last week of class. This tells you how they completed the semester, where they ended up. And you can do this in class or online. If you do it online, there's services like Lasso, which we'll talk about later, that can automate a lot of these steps for you, making it easier and save you class time. Especially if you're doing it online, but either way, you're going to provide them reminders to complete it, but especially online. We found that if you do provide multiple reminders, you can get participation rates that are equivalent to those of in class. And you're going to want to motivate students to do it and to try their best. And there's a couple ways to do this. First, just explain the goals. Explain to them, like, look, this isn't an assessment of them. This is an assessment for you to help them. So that you kind of know where they start. You can tailor the class to their needs. And it's a measure of your teaching, just to know, like, okay, how effective were you this semester? So tell them, please do your best, but you're not going to see your results, and let them know they'll get points for doing it, but not for how they do on it. So points for participation, not performance. So do your best, but know that there's no incentive to cheat. Just try your best so you can help them. Honestly where they're at. And you want to avoid time limits. This is again easier when it's done at home rather than in class. And you want to keep these research-based assessments secure. Part of that's by not telling them how they did. You don't need to tell them the name of the assessment. They don't need to worry about such things. Yeah, so don't share answers, scores, or RBA names. Finally, how to interpret these RBA scores. Well, first, recommend visualizing results. You can see your distribution on your pre-test and your post-test. Usually do that with a histogram. This is one that's automatically generated through Lasso. You can also contextualize your results. And again, this is data from Lasso. It's getting integrated in, so this will be automatically generated for you. But here you see on the x-axis pre-test scores and the y-axis post-test scores, and each dot represents a class. So you can plot your class on here based on your pre-test score and post-test score to have an idea where your class fell in compared to other courses with similar pre-test scores. And so this is right. You can also look at your own prior semesters. Say, how did you do compared to last semester? Maybe after you made a change. You can look at the literature, but again, give you a warning that literature is biased towards research-intensive institutions, which is where You can also use these online platforms like the figure on the right, which is a little more representative than what's in the literature with a full spectrum of pretest scores. So we actually recommend that sort of a comparison rather than just going to the literature. So additional resources, if you want to check out LASSO, there's more resources there. You can find it at the learningassistantalliance.org. You can also find more information on our website, stemequitynet/online workshops, where you can find all sorts of more material. All right, thank you so much.